So here is the thing. The Manley Labs Absolute Headphone Amplifier is not just another headphone amplifier. For starters, you can use it to drive the front end of your two-channel rig, and while you are at it, explore single-ended and push-pull topologies with the press of a button, and why not, dial in negative feedback until your heart is content. And now that I have your attention. Made in America hi-fi is getting harder to find these days, and with cheap gear from China being so popular, more popular than ever before, I admit the cards are stacked against me as to why you or anyone should shell out 5,000 smackaroos for a headphone amplifier regardless of where it's made. But let me surrender the white flag now and just tell you up front, that's not an argument that I'm even trying to win. The truth is, some of that cheap stuff does sound quite nice, and some of that stuff even might deserve the spotlight from time to time. But in the case of this product, which isn't going to be on Temu or AliExpress anytime soon, is what happens when Americans roll up their sleeves, pour passion into a product, and for the love of all things red, white, and blue, offer us audiophiles something that will be cherished for the rest of your lifetime, and your kid's lifetime, and probably their kid's lifetime. Being blunt and upfront, while the price of admission certainly isn't cheap, I will tell you with great confidence, I would imagine this is the kind of amplifier that someone buys when they are done and tired of the merry-go-round. So, setting aside an already hyperbolic opening and a dash of American pride to boot, let's peel back the layers of evidence as to why I believe the Absolute Headphone Amplifier from Manley Labs might be one of, if not the best tube headphone amplifier on planet Earth. Priced at $54.99, the Absolute Headphone Amplifier is an all-tube offering from Manley Labs. The amp is designed for headphone applications, but can also be used as a line-level preamp. More on that in a minute. The layout of the amp is pretty simple, with easy access to knobs and buttons on the front, along with a large volume wheel front and center. The amp is offered in your choice of black, silver, or copper, and is small enough to place on any desktop without taking up a ton of real estate. While the overall design aesthetics is certainly not for everyone, and I've already had enough reactions from friends and family that folks will either love or hate the looks of this amplifier, as for this cowboy, I need another large square box sitting on my desk as much as I need a hole in the head. For me, the narrow and easy to set aside design is one of the things that I appreciate the most. The knob layout for controls is very intuitive, and I love how easy it is to make adjustments on the fly. The amplifier is heavy as heck, with the housing made of metal and the accents being carbon fiber. I think the amp looks really cool while sitting proudly on a desk. With custom-made transformers built in-house, which is anchored by the billet chassis, there is no question in my mind that this is the kind of amplifier that will stand the test of time, while many of these silly plastic amps from China look and feel more like a toy when you compare them side by side. Taking a look at the business end of this amplifier, you are greeted with two single-ended inputs and three separate outputs. First, for the folks who want to use the Absolute as a stereo preamplifier, and yes, take advantage of this amp's flexibility in their speaker system, you can connect this to a power amplifier and presto, enjoy. I cannot stress enough how cool this is, because when you experience it, it is a freaking trip. Being able to mess around with single-ended and push-pull topologies and dial in negative feedback to my liking was quite frankly a game changer and a blast when using this thing as the front end of my stereo rig. While not the purpose or number one design goal of this amplifier, I strongly encourage anyone who dabbles with both headphones and two-channel listening to seriously consider this feature as being a massive bonus. Just below the RCA jacks is an XLR jack, and at the bottom of the amp, a 1/4-inch jack, and both of these connections are indeed designed for headphones. As far as functionality is concerned, I have only two gripes about the amplifier. First, having a headphone jack in front of the amplifier for quicker swapping would have been nice to see. Second, the remote control is pretty basic with volume as your only parameter that you can change. For me, it is a cool feature to have the remote when using the Absolute as a preamp, but my goodness me, I really wish I could have changed inputs or switch from single-ended and push-pull while I'm zoned out sitting on my chair and listening to music. But listen, these are minor gripes, and knowing this is really designed to be a headphone amplifier first, it's not the end of the world. So yeah, other than that, everything else about the Absolute headphone amp was easy to use and worked perfectly during my time with the amp. Now, the tube complement is interesting and worth highlighting. In the front, you will find a pair of 12AX7s, which is pretty typical, but in the back, the quartet of 6AQ5s was a bit of a curveball. While not a rare tube by any stretch, these guys just aren't as popular as they once were, and that, my friends, is a crying shame. With almost the same specs as a 6V6, I grew quite fond of the sound of this amplifier, and I would imagine I would have these tubes to thank for that. Either way, Manley can supply replacements, or of course you can quickly find any flavor of NOS ice cream using the old Google machine. One of the coolest features of the Absolute is its ability to switch from single-ended to push-pull with the press of a button. In a single-ended amplifier, a single tube handles the entire audio signal, amplifying both the positive and negative halves of the waveform. Single-ended amplifiers are less efficient than push-pull amplifiers because the single tube is always conducting, therefore it leads to more heat generation and lower power efficiency. Single-ended designs produce more even-order harmonic distortion, but many audiophiles, myself included, find this distortion musically pleasing, often describing it as warm or rich. As for push-pull amplifiers, two tubes work in tandem, with each tube amplifying a different half of the audio signal. One handles the positive half and the other handles the negative half. Push-pull amplifiers are generally more efficient than single-ended amplifiers, and push-pull amplifiers produce more power with less heat because the two devices are sharing the load, and this design tends to cancel out even-order harmonic distortion, resulting in a cleaner, more accurate sound. So again, here's the deal. You're about to drop $5K on this headphone amplifier, and I know that's not chump change, but it's really important to understand this. You're really getting two amplifiers, 2 amps, 2 headphone amps in one amplifier. So for rainy, melancholy days, by all means, go single-ended. For something a little more upbeat or you feel like tapping your toes, go push-pull. Having both of these designs in one amp is so much fun, and while I've had this amp for a very long time in this review process, it's because of this exact reason that I never grew tired of how it sounds. And here is the kicker. We're not even done yet. Headphones come in all kinds of flavors, and in a perfect world, every headphone would come with the same specs and requirements to wake them up. Unfortunately, that's just not the world that we live in, and buying headphones can lead to endless rabbit holes of trying to find the right amp to wake up whatever set of cans you decided to grab. The good news is, with the Absolute amplifier, that's not a problem at all. If you want to get the most out of a pair of Grados and at the same time plug in your HT600s and not have to swap amplifiers at all, that's not a problem. With low, mid, and high settings right in front of the amplifier, low covers 12 to 50 ohms, medium covers 50 to 200 ohms, and high covers 200 to 600 ohms, making it effortless to swap cans when you want, however you want, and not having to worry about whether the amp can deliver the goods. With the Absolute, the goods will be delivered. And just when you thought this was enough, Manley also includes bass and treble equalizers, a mono button, balance, and my personal favorite, the ability to dial in negative feedback to your liking. First, not everyone is a tone purist or afraid to add a little more junk in the trunk, and why not bring a little more sparkle, and with the built-in EQ circuit, both of those scenarios are not a problem. And of course, for those who are EQ intolerant, don't worry, as the tone stack is bypassed when it's not engaged. While I didn't have the need to mess around with EQ while listening, it was nice to see it's available, and I would imagine a lot of folks will embrace it right from the get-go. Second, while I don't care about a mono button or balance, it seems to me that Manley is the kind of company who is indeed considering every listener, and sure, there might be some folks with some old mono records out there who would buy this amplifier for that feature alone. As for balance, if your right and left ear starts acting up on you, or you need a helping hand to hear things correctly, the dial is there, so that's great if that particular issue decides to rear its ugly head. Last, negative feedback. Sign me up and call me Sally. As if changing the amp's topology was not enough, you now have the ability to dial in 10 decibels of negative feedback that allows you to be in the driver's seat at all times. This handy dial controls the amount of negative feedback applied to the amplifier, with the ability to change the amount of negative feedback from 10 dB to none at all and anything in between. I had a freaking blast geeking out and dialing in the exact tone I wanted track after track. I noticed with more feedback, the amp worked better at rendering dynamic passages and was my go-to flavor for all things rock music. On the other hand, with less feedback, I found myself listening to simpler arrangements or focusing more on stripped-down performances. Folks, switching the amp to single-ended and dialing back on the negative feedback was the drug of choice with anything acoustic, and let me tell you something, I could listen to this amplifier for days and days and days with just this one setting alone. It was absolutely breathtaking. During my time with the Absolute amplifier, I tried every headphone that I have on hand, and with the Verum 2 and the Meze Empyrean 2 being my favorites, it became clear to me that just like my stereo rig, tubes always bring me back to the music. And look, I have no issues with solid state, and I find myself double dating both options all of the time, but the Absolute amplifier from Manley Labs sounds more musical than any other headphone amplifier that I have ever spent time with solid state or tube. Even more, its versatility has no rival. With the Verum 2, I preferred the amp in push-pull mode with negative feedback applied, as this seemed to push the Verum's strengths and ignore any of its weaknesses. To my ears, the Verum 2 is a very balanced and even-handed sounding headphone, but doesn't quite reach the same level of detail as something like the Empyrean 2s. Of course, I'm not ignoring the fact that there is a massive price difference between these cans, but that's my point. With the Absolute, the gap between these two headphones becomes a blurry line in a quick hurry. Thanks to the ability to change the topology of the amplifier and adjust the negative feedback, I was able to squeeze the last few drops of resolution out of the Verums, and let me tell you, the juice was worth the squeeze. Being one of the best pairings of any headphone and amp that I've personally come across, I'd say anyone with this amplifier should consider grabbing a pair of these to go with it. This combo is quite frankly unbeatable, that is, unless you have a pair of Empyrean 2s laying around. With the press of a button and switching the Absolute into single-ended topology, the Empyrean 2s crack open the door to heaven and quickly establish just how great a headphone can actually sound. These headphones are incredibly detailed, they are fast, and they are fun. Hovering over the negative feedback knob and pressing play on anything from Ben Howard to Peter F. Eglis, this combo was unbeatable for the most involving and cohesive sound that I could ever imagine coming from a pair of headphones. While the Verum 2 combo in push-pull closed the distance to sounding more like the unbeatable Empyreans, the Absolute in single-ended mode and relaxing on the negative feedback ushered in a sense of bloom to the Empyreans and also calmed down found the top octave, which in turn led to the most relaxing and musical session that I could ever imagine. So yeah, cheap and cheerful gear from China or wherever it's made is fine. I take no issues for those who have made the claim that that's all that they need and they're perfectly happy with it. Even I have enjoyed a lot of that stuff, and to my ears, it can sound good from time to time. However, another thing a lot of those products are for me is forgettable. It's true. It's just forgettable stuff. The Absolute Headphone Amplifier from Manley Labs is not. And no, this video is not sponsored. And no, I don't get to keep this just because I said nice things about it. The truth is, American-made hi-fi is getting harder to find, and while the cheap and cheesy stuff from China does have its place, it's nice to see a legacy brand like Manley Labs is not only alive and kicking, they are still innovating and exceeding expectations. If you find yourself growing tired of the merry-go-round, love the sound of tubes, and you want to cash in on the last headphone amplifier you will ever need or want, I am certain the Manley Labs Absolute Headphone Amplifier is the one to beat. With its preamp flexibility for enthusiasts who want to explore what this thing can do with their 2-channel rig, that's just the icing on the cake as far as I am concerned. The Absolute Headphone Amp truly is one of those rare pieces that deserves the highest recommendation from NRD, and once again, Manley Labs has stepped up to the plate and knocked it clear out of the park. I strongly recommend checking this amp out as soon as you can. It is absolutely fantastic. And with that, I will see you Manley Labs loving audiophiles in the next video.